is a corporation. That's why when you die, you're a corpse, because you are a corporation. You are a company. And as such, you may be good company, you may be bad company, but you're a company by law. It's called International Maritime Admiralty Law. The law of money, corporations, the law of the sea. You are a company, a corporation. And therefore, anything you do is business. It may not be my business, it may be your business, but it's a business by law. Therefore, anything you do, which is your business, anything you do must have a license, because it's called a business license. So if you're going to get married, that means one corporation is going to do business with another corporation. So you have to have a marriage license. Anything you do, you need to get a permit or a license. And in America, you have something called the Statue of Liberty. It is not the Statue of Freedom. It's the Statue of Liberty. Liberty is what a sailor gets when he gets off a ship in the Navy. When you pull into port and you ask the captain if you can go on land, if he gives you the permission, and he may not. But if you get permission to go out, you have liberty. Sailors call it, we got liberty, not freedom. In America, you have no freedom. You have liberty. Liberty means you ask permission. You get a permit. You have a license. A license is simply an agreement and a permit. A license is a permit to do something which without that license would be unlawful. So therefore you can't get married because you're a business. She's a business. And what the two of you do is none of my business. But the point you need to understand is that you are a corporation. Your body is being bought and sold on the New York Stock Exchange every day, and you have no idea in the world how the world really works. So people talk about having to go to court. They talk about how the government does this and the government did that. And people get scared to death because they got to go to court, which you should be scared of court. But why do people go to court? Because you play basketball on a court. You play tennis on a court. Wake up. I've been talking about this stuff for 53 years, but nobody seems to listen to it very much anymore. The reason why you go to court is a game. It's like tennis. And how do you play tennis? You play with a racket. So when you go into a basketball game to play on the court, the whole idea is you have two teams. One team is a team of lawyers, and another team of lawyers. And the whole idea in a court, because it's maritime admiralty, international banking law, the whole idea is to put the ball back in the other guy's court. So therefore that one team picks up the ball and they throw it over here to you. Now your team picks it up and throws the ball back over their court. And then they pick the ball back and throw it back into your court. And you have a judge who's the referee. You always have a referee. Even at a baseball game, you've got the referee who makes the decision as to what really happened. I don't care what happened. He decides what happened. Whatever he says happened, that's what happened. Then the next thing you need to understand is that there's a gate, a fence, and a gate in the courtroom, and people sit out here, and the judge sits inside. Why is there a fence and a gate? Because the gate represents a water gate. Like in the Panama Canal, when the gate opens, the water comes in and raises the ship up. So therefore, when you were called and you put your hand on the gate, you are opening up the floodgate under maritime admiralty law. But happily, Americans have no idea about any of this. But once you understand how this really works, and you begin to see how your body is over 70% water, and you are a maritime admiralty water product. And the way this thing is being played is very, very interesting. The words, and the terms, and the symbols, and your body is a biological battery. We are a biological electrical unit. Therefore, if you walk into the court and they call your name and you open up the water gate, you are now in hot water. And someone's going to have to bail you out. Once you understand that the bank and money runs the world, so the judge rules from a bench. Look up the word bench. It will tell you the word bench is a bank in Latin. Therefore, the judge rules for the bench or the bank. And the judge sits higher up. When you walk in, you'll see the judge sits up here. He's looking down on you, but you're looking up to the bank, the bench. Look it up in the dictionary. When a ship pulls into a harbor, it's got like let's say $8 million worth of Toyotas on the damn ship. It pulls into a harbor. It's got $800 million worth of business on that ship, and it comes in on water. So we say when the ship comes in, it parks at the dock. The ship comes in on water. $800 million worth of banking just came in on ship. This is why I said banking is maritime admiralty, the law of the sea. So therefore, if you're going to do any business, then you need to be part of this corporation. And the World Corporation, you are a citizen on board ship. So you have a citizenship, sportsmanship, scholarship, dealerships, courtship. And anytime you order something from a big company, they're going to ship it to you. Where a ship sits, when you go to the harbor, where a ship sits, it's called berth. B-E-R-T-H. The ship is sitting in her berth. Therefore, any items that come off of that ship, all ships are she, always. Rocket ship, sailing ship, doesn't matter what kind of ship. If it's a ship, it's she. Under international law, all ships are female. Why? Because she delivers the product. The man manufactures, but the woman delivers the product. So when you have been manufactured and she, your mother, delivers the product, you are a product of two corporations. Maritime Admiralty law, your mother was a corporation, your father's a corporation. Therefore, you are the joint new product of two corporations. Ford Motor Company get together with Suzuki. That's fine, as long as you get a license, because it's business. And anything that those two companies produce, the one who gave you the license is the boss. Because before that, you couldn't do it at all. But if the corporation gave you the permission to create a new product, fine. But the product belongs to them, not you.
What if I told you the government has your baby's DNA? And in some states, that DNA is stored even without your consent.
So once you understand that all ships are female, she sits in her berth, and any item taken off of that ship has to have its own certificate of manifest. It's called a certificate of manifest. And each car has to be represented. Does it have 4 doors, 2 doors, air conditioning? What color is it? How heavy is it? What, this and that, and all the paperwork has to be correct for each item. So when you're born, it's called a birth certificate. How much did you weigh? What race is it? Did he have 2 eyes? Was it 1 arm? What color was he, etc. Because these are all vital signs for a product. You are a human resource. You're going to be bought and sold by the international banks in New York and London. Your body as a security on the New York Stock Exchange. According to the British and American, there's a book you can get from the American printing office or the U.S. government printing office. It's called the Styles book. Styles magazine or Styles book. U.S. printing office Styles manual. Styles manual. And And in the Styles Manual, published by the United States Government Printing Office, it tells you what the words mean correctly. When you go to court, and you're in a federal court, you're in an international court of any kind, here are the words to use. Because the words you would use don't work in a court. You better know what you're talking about when you're before a judge. You better use the correct term. Because if you use a wrong term, thinking that they will understand, no, now you're going to jail because you said the wrong word. So a group of people got together back in 1871, before your grandma was born, 1871, and they formed a corporation after the Civil War. In the Civil War, they called their company United States Corporation. It was a municipal corporation. And it was stipulated anybody who worked for the corporation is a member of the corporation. And so today, if you are a U.S. citizen, when you walk in a bank or any place, before some authority, and they ask you, "Are you a U.S. citizen?" and you say yes, what you think they are asking you is, are you lawfully in America to do business? Are you lawfully here? Or you are an alien, all right? And you say, no, I'm lawfully to be here, I'm okay. So then they will say, well, are you a U.S. citizen? And you say, yes. What you think you're saying is that you're saying, yes, I am lawfully in America. That's not, any good attorney will tell you, I'm going to ask you something under oath. Think about what I'm asking you. Because if you answer wrong, you're going to jail. And my question is, are you, of your own volition, out of your own mouth, testifying in this court that you are a U.S. citizen? And you say, well, I'm lawfully in America. Yeah, I don't have any problems here. Sure, I'm a U.S. citizen. That's what I wanted to know. Now you're going to jail. Now you go to prison. Because you're not an American, you don't have American freedom, you don't have the Bill of Rights, you're a U.S. citizen.
Prior to 1938, all the law that was practiced was common law, which is constitutional law, which was case law, which meant common law meant you had due process, jury trials. As long as there were sovereign people and there was common law and there was a valid money system, the republic was in order. As long as you had the sovereign people, the sovereign states, and the common law, and a constitutional money system, the republic is in order. When the sovereign people begin disappearing, when the country goes bankrupt, then the common law disappears, and then you have negotiable instruments law or bankruptcy law. Ever since 1938, we've been dealing in Uniform Commercial Code, negotiable instruments law, law of the law merchant, the international law of the high seas, and the law of the creditor is Admiralty. Admiralty jurisdiction, maritime procedure. The sovereigns do not exist on the land. They exist on the sea, in between nation states, in legal structures that exist under Admiralty and maritime. All the power structures that are sovereign do not have allegiance to nation states. The nation states are their servants. They are created as ships of state to execute the sovereignty. The sovereign powers have always used the Admiralty jurisdiction and maritime procedures to execute their procedures. That is the only thing going on in the courts today. All issues of traffic, revenue, and insurance are Admiralty. And in an Admiralty proceeding, which most people don't understand because they can't conceive of it, they think that, one, we still have a Constitution and a Bill of Rights, and it's the law of the land, and we have common law, and we have rights, and we have due process, and there's actually procedures here that follow the constitutional standards. There are none. Remember, there is no Constitution or Bill of Rights without the sovereign people. There is no common law in a bankrupt country. There's only Admiralty law. in 1933, when the country went bankrupt, it declared a perpetual state of national emergency, which was bankruptcy. We have been in a perpetual state of national emergency since 1933. There have been 470 consecutive states of emergency without a breath for the constitutional republic to breathe. One executive order after another. Also, in a perpetual state of national emergency, the Constitution is suspended as well. And so, what is being executed in the legal systems today under Admiralty jurisdiction and maritime procedures? When you get a traffic citation, it is a maritime procedure. When they are impounding your property, it is a maritime procedure. When they have forfeited your land, it is a maritime procedure. But they don't tell you that. They play games and they pretend with you. The second they seize your property, they've executed an Admiralty claim. They seized your vessel or your vassal. A vassal is a slave. You'll look on the California registration, you'll see the registration is for vessels. All of your property is a vessel, whether it's on land or on sea. And an Admiralty proceeding is initiated at the moment that they seize your vessel or your body, which is their property, and a vessel as well, when they arrest you. In an Admiralty proceeding, you cannot challenge jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is assumed the second they confiscate the property. Then what the courts do is they shift from Admiralty to equity, without telling you. And now they perform under a quasi-contract. Because in an Admiralty contract, if it was an Admiralty jurisdiction, there would have to be a signed international contract in force. But they know there isn't one with your name on it. But there is one with the name of the Federal United States on it. And since you're a subject of the Federal United States, the Federal United States is subject to its creditors. The creditors are the insurance underwriters of the debt of the Federal United States, executing an Admiralty claim in the court systems. Your accuser is the International Monetary Fund for a simple traffic citation. And who is the proctor? The proctor in an Admiralty proceeding is the U.S. Attorney. In fact, all the attorneys are proctors, acting on behalf of the creditors. In a bankruptcy, the Secretary of the Treasurer is a receiver in a bankruptcy who is also the governor of the International Monetary Fund. The U.S. Attorney General, Janet Reno, is not a U.S. citizen, and neither is the Secretary of the Treasurer. They both expatriated in 1948 when they joined Interpol, the International Police Organization, by treaty. And they transferred their allegiance to the International Police Organization. So the International Police Organization, Interpol, is the police arm of the creditor, the International Monetary Fund, and they are your accusers. They're trying to collect on a debt that the federal government owes and you owe because you're a U.S. citizen.
Another misconception is that a nation's constitution gives us our rights. A constitution does nothing more than list the rights that we already have. We are born with inalienable rights, endowed to us by our Creator. They are not given to us, and they cannot be given away. The most a person can do with a right is choose whether to exercise it or not. Maritime Admiralty law is what's known as the law of the water. It is superseded by civil law and only applies to those who willingly contract themselves into it. The definition of Admiralty law is a body of private international law governing the relationships between private entities which operate vessels on the oceans. Let's look at how and why a form of law that is fashioned to govern corporations, businesses, and vessels has imposed its rule over natural human beings. This is all done through a form of word magic. A simple perversion of language has made it possible to convince people around the world that these alternative laws apply to them. One of the predominant beliefs in modern culture is that licenses, permits, registrations, and other forms of documentation are required to operate motor vehicles, use public roads, build structures and establishments, engage in free enterprise, and much more. Sadly, These beliefs are based on little to no investigation whatsoever and are false. This belief structure is perpetuated by maritime admiralty law. This form of law was originally created to govern ships docking in foreign nations for the import or export of products and resources. It deals with banking and merchant affairs, not civil affairs. When a product is taken off of a ship and brought into a foreign land, that nation takes custody of the resource and accounts for it with a certificate. That certificate marks the birth date of that product in the custody of the respective nation. Think of why it is supposedly required to have a certificate of live birth in the first place. The Barron's Dictionary of Banking Terms defines a certificate as a paper establishing an ownership claim. So right there, we notice that everyone with a birth certificate is defined as being owned. People are used as collateral with other nations because the U.S. is bankrupt. The United States declared bankruptcy on March 9th of 1933. At this point, the U.S. began taking out loans from a private, non-government affiliated corporation called the Federal Reserve. With no money to pay back the loans, the United States began using the citizens as collateral. All birth and marriage certificates are literally warehouse receipts. Just look at the similarities of warehouse receipts and birth certificates. Both document the date of issue, a serial number, registration number or receipt number, a description of the product, and an authorized informant to notify the appropriate government agency. With all of this information being readily available, the majority of people are unaware of their involvement with maritime admiralty law. This is possible through the manipulation of language. This admiralty law changed the meaning of the word person from a natural living person to a corporation. Driver's licenses, vehicle registrations, auto insurance forms, building permits, gun permits, work permits, tax filing documents, birth and death certificates, traffic citations, and many other forms of documentation that were once believed to be absolutely necessary only applied to persons or corporations. Upon signing such a legal document, you are indirectly waiving your rights under the Constitution and lowering your status to that of a corporation that is created with the same exact name as you. The only way to reconcile your true name from the name of the corporation is to take notice that the corporation has its name in all capital letters. This is known as capitis diminutia maxima. You may take notice that your driver's license, birth certificate, social security card, insurance cards, and more use all capital letters to legally represent the corporation with your name, not you. The corporation is known as an artificial person, whereas you, the human being, are known as a natural person. This deception goes even deeper when it comes to the courts that we attend. When showing up to court, you will notice that there are seats for witnesses behind a wooden fence or barrier. The defendant must cross through the entrance to the other side of the barrier where the plaintiff and judge sit. This act symbolizes the boarding of a ship. At this time, business can be conducted in maritime admiralty law. The judge, acting as captain or banker, is responsible for settling the balance between the two sides. This is why there is always a monetary value involved in any court case. The captain is simply dealing with banking and merchant disputes. Once the balance is paid, the case is closed. To turn the court case away from admiralty law where your rights are not protected, you must avoid agreeing to represent the artificial person. This is done by stating that you are the natural person. You don't have a first or last name because those imply corporate title. In a court case, you may state that the court takes judicial notice of your honor's oath of office. Every judge must take an oath of office to practice law, yet you must make it clear to the court and the jury that the judge is acting as judge and not banker. Remember that you are a natural human being of the earth. You are not governed by anything but your own consciousness. Laws are created within a society. The society that created the laws we see being enforced today is called the Law Society. Yet the most beautiful part of this entire deception is the fact that we are not part of the law society, so their laws do not apply to us. Judges, lawyers, and law enforcement officers, they're all part of a society. Within that society, they've created their own language that's deceptively similar to English. They have these little things called statutes, acts, and regulations that seem like laws, but they really only apply to those within their society. So that basically means all the traffic violations, minimum age requirements, and everything except for damage to another person or their property doesn't really apply to the natural person. Laws only apply to those within the law society. The game being played is an illusion.
I am liberty. I am the living symbol of all women, creeds, and races. I am the hopes and dreams of all mankind. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send them, tempest-tossed, to me. I lift the lamp beside the golden dawn.
We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. 3.5 million men and women are directly engaged in the defense establishment. Now, this conjunction of an immense military establishment and a large arms industry is new. In the councils of government, we must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex. The potential for the disastrous rise of misplaced power exists and will persist.
For 20 years, first the French and then the United States had been predicting victory in Vietnam. In 1961 and in 1962, as well as 1966 and 1967, we have been told that the tide is turning. We have been wrong. The history of conflict among nations does not record another such lengthy and consistent chronicle of error as we have shown in Vietnam. It is time to discard so proven a fallacy and face the reality that a military...
The government. It loves you and wants to keep you safe and well. It even wants to make paying taxes, fines, and court costs easier for you. How? Well, you'll need to meet your straw man. He was born the same day you were. He looks like you, has the same name, and lives in your house, but you never knew he existed. You will have even paid his parking tickets or taxes. The worst part? He's been dead from day one. From every birth certificate, a legal personality, or legal fiction, is created with the same name to confuse little old you into thinking it's you. So, there is a human you and a paper you, or as it's commonly known, a straw man. So when it seems like government officials, court clerks, or the police are speaking English, they aren't. They're speaking legalese, designed to make you agree to verbal and written contracts without even knowing about it, all spun from Black's Law Dictionary. For example, when the police say, "Do you understand?" you'll say, "Yes." What they are really saying is, "Do you stand under our authority?" Oops-a-daisy, you just created a verbal contract with them. Oh, you clever government. Did you know that whenever you register something, you are handing over title to the person you register it with? That's right. Whenever you register something with the government, they assume it belongs to them. Registered your car? Super! Now you are the registered keeper of your vehicle, and the government can crush it when you don't pay your, straw man's taxes. Expecting a new bundle of joy? Well, then you need to register your little darling with a birth certificate. Then they can start the process all over again and create a new straw man for your little one. Isn't that great? So when Junior grows up, he'll be able to generate revenue just like you have. When you notify on your baby by signing the birth certificate, your child becomes a ward of state. And if the government doesn't like what you're doing, they'll assume it's okay to take the child away or make new rules for things they don't like. Not enough school? Smacking your child? Shouting too loudly? Then it's off to social services for the little one. When you get a bill, it's sent to you but belongs to your straw man, not you. That's why bills, fines, and summons start with Mr., Mrs., or Ms. Sometimes you'll see your surname in capitals, just like on a gravestone. That's because your straw man is dead and just a silly piece of paper, created before you could comprehend or even consent to it. When you go to court, you represent your straw man, so you, the human, take on any costs, fees, taxes, and fines involved for the straw man. The human you doesn't even need to pay them. But you made a contract with the court by appearing on behalf of your legal personality or straw man, just like the government knew you would. Confused? Well, don't worry. The government doesn't want you to know anyway. If you knew, you'd stop paying things like council tax and parking tickets. Because when you go to court, you are representing your straw man. You are you, alive and made of flesh and blood. Your straw man, or legal personality, is a piece of paper created from your birth certificate. And you think it's you. What a silly Billy.
If you've never heard of the terms legal fiction or straw man, then what you're about to learn is something that sounds so astonishing that it couldn't possibly be true. If I were to tell you that paying your tax, getting a driver's license, registering your car, paying fines, and attending court are all optional and that you are conned into agreeing with them, what would you think? All statutes and acts are optional too. Your straw man is a fictitious legal entity created at your birth through your birth certificate and the registration of that birth.
Okay, my understanding of the legal fiction, which is also referred to as the straw man, the way I explain it when I do talks, I keep it really, really simple. And what I do, I liken it to a game of Monopoly. Now, in a game of Monopoly, you actually have a little token like a dog or a battleship or a hat, like a little top hat, and you move it around the board. Now, I believe that they actually give us a fictional entity which we can actually use or not use. And I believe this is and a lot of other researchers do as well, that this is your name in either uppercase or with a title.
That when each person is born, whenever a human being is born, there's two entities. One is the real entity, which is the human being, the flesh and blood, and the other is a legal fiction, a fictional entity that is nothing more than a piece of paper, the birth certificate. Again, we're duped into believing that these are one in the same, and so we're tricked into representing the legal fiction, the straw man, that birth certificate. So when people get fines and things like that, it's actually consulting the legal fiction, the non-existent entity, the corporate entity that is owned by corporations.
You have issues with the bureaucracy. Okay, they're not interacting with you. They're actually interacting with your legal fiction, because they can't deal with a flesh and blood human. Yeah, they have to deal with another corporation.
When you start to break down the words that we use, and you start to look at the roots of all these words, and you actually look at what these words actually really mean, you start to get an idea of what's going on. The word corporation is very, very specific, because it's corporation, it's dead speak. So a corporation is something that's dead. It's an entity that exists only in a legal framework. It doesn't exist in any other framework at all. It only becomes an entity through legal mechanisms and legal means.
In essence, when you were born and far too young to understand, a company with your name was created through your birth certificate. When your parents registered your birth, they actually created a company and handed ownership of that company and you over to the state. It is important to remember that your parents were tricked and had no idea this was happening. This is why the state can take children from their families and it not be classed as kidnapping. They own your child.
Of audiences, and actually said to me, you're right in what you're saying, is because we have to get the birth certificate within 48 hours of taking the child. And if they can't get the birth certificate, they have to reapply to be able to get the birth certificate. They have to get it, because that is proof of who the slave is, what the slave is. And actually, in legal terms, they're actually only entitled to the birth certificate and not the child. To take the child on the pretense that they are this legal personality is theft. So in legal terms, it's kidnapping. But for social services, can use legal kidnapping, because everything is okay as long as it has the stamp legal applied to it. That includes war, genocide, anything is okay as long as it's okay, it's legal.
The same thing also happens when you register your car. You get a document back saying you are the registered keeper and not the registered owner.
So yeah, obviously we've just spoken about registering children, and the other thing that we register though is our vehicles. And obviously either of those can allegedly be taken off you at some point in time, which is quite interesting. The two registered items are the things that can be taken.
You are the registered keeper of your car. You're not the owner, you're the keeper in their eyes. Now they'll argue that point, and a lot of people will argue that point, but it's quite easy to quell this argument and say, well, okay, if you don't put tax on the car, then they'll come and take your car. Now, in the legal world, taking anything from someone without a legal mechanism to do so is theft.
The legal system cannot deal with humans. It can only deal with pieces of paper. Only common law can deal with humans. So at your birth, they created a piece of paper with your name on it, in capitals, just like any other corporation. This is done to dupe you later in life into thinking that you are the legal entity and not you. Then imaginary penalties and cost are imposed on the straw man, and you, thinking you are it, pay them.
And it's kind of like an overcoat, this legal fiction. As soon as you put it on, as soon as they invite you to put this overcoat on, and you do so, now they can grab hold of the overcoat and throw it in jail with you in it.
The deception is done through the manipulation of words and language.
What is wonderful is that they create their own language called legalese, and it has a completely different interpretation from English. We're supposed to have, this sort of understanding that we work within the law, and yet they're not even using the same language as we are.
The easiest way to understand legalese is to realize that there are many English words that have more than one meaning, depending on whom you are talking to. If I were to ask you what a person was, you'd probably say a human being. But that's you or I. If you were talking to someone in the law society, i.e. a police officer, lawyer, judge, etc., They have a different dictionary to you or I, and person could mean company or corporation, i.e., the legal fiction.
You know, if you tell a lie often enough, it becomes truth, or certainly the perception of truth. So legalese is jargon that nobody understands other than those who actually come up with a jargon that really, really deeply understand it. And even police officers don't understand it, or magistrates, or even judges for that matter. The whole crux of the financial system is what I normally do when I'm doing a talk. I have a little bag of marbles, and I have 10 marbles in there if I haven't lost one of them. And so what I do, I sort of get the marbles out, show everyone, right, 10 marbles, put them back in the bag. I say, right, is there anyone here that can get 11 marbles out of this bag? And they're all looking at me like I'm mad. I say, well, that's how the banking system works. It's absolutely crazy, because what they do, they create a certain amount of money, but then they want more back. But hang on, that interest that they want more back doesn't exist. It can never exist. So two things have to happen as a result. One thing, the supply of money, or marbles, whatever we're talking about, has to increase. And not only does it increase, it has to increase exponentially, more on top of more. So it's basically, the curve is going up and up and up and up. The other thing that happens is people are always, it's like musical chairs. You know, if we all stand up and dance and then we all sit down, but a chair is taken away, somebody is going to end up on the floor. Somebody can't find that money to pay back because that money does not exist. And this creates the poverty and crazy competition and not enough to go round. And this is the biggest problem with fractional reserve banking.
Understanding words is what you really need to start doing. You need to start doing your homework and understanding words. If you put an S in front of words, it becomes swords. And that's what words are. They're cutting. They can cause you great trouble. Humans are word control creatures. So we need to establish what words mean. Again, when we talk about law, there's a Roman maximum in law that says, for he that would be deceived, let him. Simply meaning, if you are so ignorant as to be deceived, then that's your business. That's your problem. So,
Black robe. Exactly the same black robe that the priest or the bishop wears. So whether you are religious or not, when you go to court, you are under their jurisdiction. And you are putting yourself under the law of the ancient Roman law.
I've provided some very symbolically sound evidence that the beast of the sea is a type of newly resurrected European kingdom, and the mystery Babylon, or the harlot that rides on top of this beast, is the Vatican.
The question of how and why the United Nations is the crux of the great conspiracy to destroy the sovereignty of the United States and the enslavement of the American people within a UN one-world dictatorship is a complete and unknown mystery to the vast majority of the American people. The reason for this unawareness of the frightening danger to our country and to the entire free world is simple. The masterminds behind this great conspiracy have absolute control of all of our mass communications media, especially television, the radio, the press, and Hollywood. We all know that our State Department, the Pentagon, and the White House have brazenly proclaimed that they have the right and the power to manage the news, to tell us not the truth, but what they want us to believe. They have seized that power on orders from their masters of the great conspiracy. And the objective is to brainwash the people into accepting the phony peace bait to transform the United States into an enslaved unit of the United Nations one world government. First of all, bear in mind that the so-called UN police action in Korea, fought by the United States, in which 150,000 of our sons were murdered and maimed, was part of the plot. just as the undeclared by Congress war in Vietnam, in which our sons are dying, is part of the plot, just as the plot against Rhodesia and South Africa, in which our sons will be dying, is part of the UN plot. However, the vitally important thing for all Americans, all you mothers of the boys who died in Korea and are now dying in Vietnam, to know is that our so-called leaders in Washington, whom we elected to safeguard our nation and our Constitution, are the betrayers, and that behind them are a comparatively small group of men whose sole objective is to enslave the whole world of humanity in their satanic plot of one world government. Now, in order to give you a very clear picture of this satanic plot, I will go back to its beginning, clear back in the middle of the 18th century, and name the men who put that plot into action, and then bring you down to the present, today's status of that plot. Now, as a matter of further intelligence, a term used by the FBI, let me clarify the meaning of the expression, "he is a liberal." The enemy, meaning the one-world conspirators, have seized upon that word liberal as a cover-up for their activities. It sounds so innocent and so humanitarian to be liberal. We'll make sure that the person who calls himself a liberal or is described as a liberal is not in truth a red. Now then, this satanic plot was launched back in the 1760s when it first came into existence under the name of the Illuminati. This Illuminati was organized by one Adam Weishaupt, born a Jew, who was converted to Catholicism and became a Catholic priest, and then, at the behest of the then newly organized House of Rothschild, defected and organized the Illuminati. Naturally, the Rothschilds financed that operation. And every war since then, beginning with the French Revolution, has been promoted by the Illuminati, operating under various names and guises. I say under various names and guises because after the Illuminati was exposed and became too notorious, Weishaupt and his co-conspirators began to operate under various other names. In the United States, immediately after World War I, they set up what they called the Council on Foreign Relations, commonly referred to as the CFR. And this CFR is actually the Illuminati in the United States. And its hierarchy, the masterminds in control of the CFR, to a very great extent, are the descendants of the original Illuminati conspirators. But to conceal that fact, most of them changed their original family names to American-sounding names. For example, the true name of the Dillons, Clarence and Douglas Dillon, once Secretary of the U.S. Treasury Department, is Lepowski. I'll come back to all this later. There is a similar establishment of the Illuminati in England, operating under the name of the British Institute of International Affairs. There are similar secret Illuminati organizations in France, Germany, and other nations operating under different names. And all these organizations, including the CFR, continuously set up numerous subsidiary or front organizations that are infiltrated into every phase of the various nations' affairs. But at all times, the operations of these organizations were and are masterminded and controlled by the internationalist bankers, who in turn were and are controlled by the Rothschilds.
And I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. Reward her even as she rewarded you, and double unto her double according to her works. In the cup which she hath filled, fill to her double. How much she hath glorified herself and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her. For she saith in her heart, I sit a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judgeth her. And the kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her shall bewail her and lament for her when they shall see the smoke of her burning, standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise any more, the merchandise of gold and silver, and precious stones, and of pearls, and fine linen, and purple, and silk, and scarlet, and all fine wood, and all manner vessels of ivory, and all manner vessels of most precious wood, and of brass, and iron, and marble, and cinnamon, and odors, and ointments, and frankincense, and wine, and oil, and fine flour, and wheat, and beasts, and sheep, and horses, and chariots, and slaves, and souls of men. And the fruits that thy soul lusted after are departed from thee, and all things which were dainty and goodly are departed from thee, and thou shalt find them no more at all. The merchants of these things, which were made rich by her, shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in fine linen, and purple and scarlet, and decked with gold, and precious stones and pearls. For in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught. And every shipmaster, and all the company in ships, and sailors, and as many as trade by sea, stood afar off, and cried when they saw the smoke of her burning, saying, What city is like unto this great city? And they cast dust on their heads, and cried, weeping and wailing, saying, Alas, alas, that great city, wherein were made rich all that had ships in the sea by reason of her costliness. For in 1 hour is she made desolate. Rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles and prophets, for God hath avenged you on her.